Hi, thanks everybody for coming out tonight. Hope everybody is healthy. Tonight we have a special guest, Tinker Secor, I always say Sector. Tinker Secor on Twitter. We'll be talking about hacking. And now you can take it.
Sounds good. I appreciate y'all having me here. I'm glad that we're able to do a lot of these virtual meetups, especially in light of the pandemic. So I'm glad everybody could jump on. Figure I can start off by giving a short story of one of the break-ins that I participated in. Take, I don't know, about take a shot. I'm reading off of the group chat right in here. If you have your COVID-19 bingo card, we'll start having fun with that. Since this is a university college group, I imagine everybody should have some whiskey or beer at least at home to take along with us. So we'll start up with a little bit of a story. And then after that, really just kind of be chill, and I'll open up to questions and go for about an hour or so total. And but anything that I have and I know, y'all are welcome to give me information. If you're not going to ask a bad question, if I don't know it, I'll tell you. And if I'm not able to talk about it, I'll tell you. All right. So a couple years ago, found myself in Italy, Milan to be specific. Small group. It was me and one other colleague. I kind of held the role. We were both doing a break-in of some retail stores over there. And my colleague was an old school grifter, very, very good about, being able to con folks, social engineer folks. I kind of had the role as hacker. The goal was to break into these retail stores, get access to the point of sale systems, and set down a foothold on their point of sale systems in order to pivot into their corporate networks, do both actions on target there in the local retail store and pivot and do actions on target within the corporate enterprise. So we flew out to Italy and we kind of approached this retail store. We'd done a little bit of recon the day before. It was in a kind of a shopping area, open shopping area near downtown Milan. Social engineering is kind of difficult to begin with, but when you're trying to con someone in a language that you're not native to, that can be even a bit more interesting. On the way over, I had practiced, or my colleague had practiced, good cons. She had written up basically a letter of authorization, a fake, a fraudulent letter of authorization. Our pretext was that we were coming in before Christmas and we were going to update all the store systems prior to the Christmas rush. This was probably early to mid-November when we were hitting them. And so she wrote up an entire good authorization letter. We had made up business cards. I had gone and gotten a hold of the corporate logo and made a polo for myself. So I kind of looked like an IT tech. She went in with basically business professional, basically going in almost as an auditor, as my supervisor. She'd written everything up, got it translated with a Google Translator, and then sweet talk the concierge of our hotel there to help her write it out in a little bit more colloquial, a little bit more natural language. He was happy to oblige. So it was rather nice of him. So when we went up, she had practiced a lot of Italian and kind of conversational Italian. I had practiced, the important things, where's the restroom? Hello, my name is police. I'm unarmed. Don't shoot. That sort of thing. And she had been a little bit more social on her side. So we come up, and the attendant, and it's just a normal. I think it was a young woman. My colleague started speaking to her in Italian, kind of handed over the letter of authorization. That basically said, "Hey, we're here to get access to your computers." Beforehand, she asked me what I needed, and I figured we had done a little bit of scoping of this place, a little bit of reconnaissance, and it's just like a retail store here. You have your front end of where all the wares are displayed, et cetera, and then in the back they had kind of a little shack room kind of thing behind a pen pad, and that I figured was where the router was. And so I said, "Hey, get me in that back door, that back room." and I'll take it from there. So she goes, okay, stick behind me and follow my lead. I went in, and it was kind of cold, so I was wearing a coat. She goes right up to the attendant, speaks what I thought was amazing Italian. I don't think she spoke Italian before this, and handed the woman this fake authorization letter. The woman starts reading it through, kind of looks at my colleague with a little bit of concern, and my colleague produces a business card, one of the fraudulent ones that we had created, and business cards rolled around our authorization. And she goes, oh, that's fine. I pulled out my business card and I unzipped my coat and kind of showed off my corporate polo and kind of smiled at her. And she goes, all right, sounds good. Motioned me over, and in front of me typed into the pen pad, 1397, opened up the door and pointed up. And I said in a fairly thick Texan accent, grazie mille, climbed up a ladder and started plugging into the router, started hacking into it. While I was doing that, my colleague started going around the entire area, noting all of the security cameras, and then she went into the back room with me and got access to the security camera management console. And from there, she demonstrated that she could turn things off, erase footage, etc., basically hide our tracks. She got done, came up to me, asked me what I was doing, and I was sitting down. I was trying to steal credentials on the network. This was a Windows environment, so I was trying to steal network authentication hashes. If y'all are familiar with Windows environments, Active Directory environments, and similar, if you're familiar with LLMNR, link local, I can't remember the rest of that acronym, WPAD, NetBIOS, those sort of things. Whenever if you start up a computer in like a student organization or a college organization that's managed by Active Directory, and shares are automatically associated with your workstation, you'll be interacting and engaging in the sort of protocols that this goes. But long and short, I created a malicious SMB share and some other things, a WPAT server, HTTP server, using Responder, if you're familiar with that tool, to poison traffic. And I figured once I got that hash, I could then brute force and crack that hash and start getting passwords. The idea was I was going to be in here for about 10 minutes, get as much information as I could, and then we'd leave and come back and maybe hack in through Wi-Fi a second time. I was not expecting to hack in everything there. Maybe leave a rogue device behind. So she comes up, asking me what I'm doing, and she's a rather attractive woman. I'm trying to, impress her. And I go, hey, I'm stealing hashes. I'm going to try to crack these passwords, thinking I'm going to impress her. And she hears passwords. She goes, oh, you need passwords? I go, yeah. And she goes, hold on. She goes out, and about a minute and a half later comes back in, and she had taken a picture of all of the store's passwords. I'm like, how'd you get that? And she goes, well, I asked the lady for the passwords. And because she thought we were, already authority, she already trusted us. She goes, oh, well, of course they need the passwords. And so I'm seeing the Wi-Fi password. I'm seeing the user password used to log into the point of sale. So there we go. I'm seeing like the Pandora, the Spotify password for the store radio station. And a lot. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing here? Right? You've done everything. I don't need to do anything else. And she kind of hushed me a little bit. The lady looked back, but I don't think we blew her cover. And if anything, we made ourselves look a little more natural. I was able to log in with the user password, put down a listening device, and then escalate privileges from there and pivot. And we were done. We kind of hit the target, hit them hard, and had a really nice meal out in Milan. We hit a couple other places in Milan before we left. We took a train and then a bus ride down. We took a train down to the border, down to Genoa, and then we took a rather nice bus down to Nice, France. And along the French Riviera, we broke into some other places. Two places in particular really stood out to me. We used the same ruse, the same pretext that we had used elsewhere, and we had gotten really good at it. And we kind of tailored it for each individual area, but it worked. France was a little bit different. This was Nice, France, right after their terrorist attack, and so the entire city was on edge. The French culture was different from the Italian culture as well, and so we kind of had to change things a little bit. But one of the places that we went in early on, the manager was there. So the manager was actually in there, and they had two attendants, and so we're not just we're not just conning an attendant. We have to con the manager too. And the manager was a little skeptical and said, hey, I need to make sure this is legit, and gets on the phone. Well, while he's doing that, I make a beeline right for the point of sale device. Like, okay, well, while you're getting authorization, I'm gonna begin setting up. And he was like, he had a lot of things in his hands, so he let me pass. And my colleague kept him busy. He ended up giving the phone to the colleague, said, here, you talk to my managers, get everything sorted out. I'll talk to him afterwards. And my colleague gave me a look that basically said, look, I'm gonna hold out as long as possible, but I don't think I can convince him that we're legit. Do what you got to do, kind of thing. It was, when you've been working with a person for a long time, you get those little nonverbal clues. And she kind of gave me a look like, fuck, I'm going to try. And I was like, all right, go. So I go straight for the point of sale device. And instead of being kind of like a kiosk, a program that was running, on top of things that the user couldn't get out of, it was just a raw Windows box running the point of sale software on top of it. There was I could easily press the Windows key and bring up a start menu. So I did so, brought up a PowerShell terminal, ran a who am I, and they were logged in as local administrator. That meant that I didn't have to do any sort of privilege isolation. I basically had it there. So I had a listener set up on the internet, and I had a kind of a little malware repo stored in GitHub. And I basically just did a download pull and then an invoke for the PowerShell script I had that allowed me to have that reverse shell. And so basically from just typing it out really quick, I was able to pop a reverse shell onto that box. And because it was running as local admin, I had full control of that box. I did this in about 10, 15 minutes or so from the time of moving over there, getting feel for everything. And then I looked behind, there was a little router there with the Wi-Fi password, so I was able to get that if we needed persistence. But I was able to pop a shell. And about shortly after that, I started doing some other things. Shortly after that, the manager came up to me and said, hey, look, I can't let you keep doing this. This is all in French. And so they spoke a little bit of English. We didn't try to pose as French, right? We tried to pose as corporate American or what have you, or corporate had sent Americans over or whatever. And he goes, hey, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Come back tomorrow after you had spoken to people. I go, okay, it sounds fine. And I packed up and left. But by that time, he kicked us out, right? But by that time, I had already gotten all the access I needed. So he had detected and responded. He didn't know it was an attack necessarily, but he knew we weren't authorized, and he kicked us out, but not before I was able to do everything I needed to do. The last place we went, at this point, we had our story down. The last place we went, we did the whole thing. We went up. It was a single attendant, supposed to be a little bit easier. And we went up to the attendant and said, hey, here's everything. Here's a letter of authorization. Here's our business cards, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he goes, okay, it sounds good, but no. And this is in French. And we're like, well, what do you mean no? and he goes, well, no, I can't let you. Let me call my manager. And he called his manager himself. Manager didn't know it, so they called their supervisor and ran it up the chain. And meanwhile, I'm trying to break away, but he was very polite, but he was very firm and said, no, I'm not going to let you touch my computer. Let me get this checked real quick. Long and short, it went straight up the chain until it got to the person who hired us. And the person goes, okay, well, have them call this number and don't let them in until they get authorization. The person who hired us didn't blow our cover, but he went through what he normally would have done. He's like, I did not authorize that, et cetera, as a legitimate thing. Have them call this. And so the person goes, okay, I'm sorry, go talk to this person. As soon as you get everything cleared with them, they'll let me know and I'll let you back in. So at that point, we were done. I could maybe wait and break in at night, but there were guards outside these shopping centers and police, and we were not going to play that game. And we had done a fairly robust scoping out of this place, fairly robust attack. And this is kind of the only job that I know as a pen tester, as a penetration tester, where as a security tester, that if you fail, assuming you've done due diligence and thorough job, you validated controls. The client likes it when you fail in that sense, as long as you validate the controls. And we had validated this fully. And so we made a decision at that point to let this person know what we had done. We had not let anybody else know. We don't want people getting in trouble. We don't want to rub it in. This is a systemic issue that we're finding. We don't want anybody getting fired. But this person, we want to let him know he did a good job. We want his name because we wanted to give him kudos. We wanted to, to praise him. And you kind of go, well, what would you say if you know, you passed the test, right? You had repelled the attacker, you had stopped the hack, you know, how would you feel? We let this guy know, and he was pissed off at us. He was angry. He goes, what do you mean you lied to me? And if you lied to me, who's going to fix my computer? My computers are slow. The holidays are coming. I've been asking for this. And if you're not going to fix my computer, who's going to fix my computer? I need these things to go fast. It's terrible. And who goes around on Christmas lying to people? You know, what kind of people are you? It's terrible. And we felt like shit, of course. But it got me thinking afterwards. You know, we left, and that was all fine. But we kind of talked him down, said, look, this is standards. Actual attackers, you know, won't attack you. We're doing this to protect you, et cetera. But he was still pissed off because he did need his stuff upgraded. But I got to thinking afterwards, you know, he stopped us, right? He repelled us, but he believed us. He fell for our con, hook, line, and sinker. It wasn't that he suspected we were doing a bad thing and he told us to go away. He fully believed our story and wanted us to access his computers because he needed those his systems upgraded for the holidays. Our pretext was legitimate. We conned him. He fell for it. But he knew that if he was not aware of it beforehand, of anybody coming in, if he had not called out, he knew that if someone came to him, he needed permission. And if he was not the one to organize it, he needed to make sure that someone else had organized it. He had a policy and procedure of the right thing to do no matter what. Even if a legitimate IT repairman came in or whatever, he would have done the exact same thing with them. And that got me thinking, you know, a lot of times we teach people the attacks, we teach people attacks, you know, as awareness, but there are an infinite number of attacks. If you teach the person the one right thing to do, though, they'll do that no matter what, even during attacks. And that's basically my story. So with that in mind, I am Tinker. I am a penetration tester. I do red team and adversarial emulation operations and exercises. Do a lot of purple teaming as well. I've got a background in blue team with intrusion detection. And prior to that, I was in the United States Marine Corps. I've built up teams, I've led teams, I've trained teams, been all around the world doing that kind of stuff. So if y'all have any questions, let me know. I'm looking in the group chat right now. Mitchell says, note to self, bring simple tune-up on a USB, use as a reward for good users. He puts a good smiley face, you know, just plugs a USB in for it. That's a wonderful pretext to do. This individual would not have fallen for it, I don't believe. One big thing though with USBs is just plugging in a USB used to work when we had auto run. But a lot of Windows machines nowadays don't have auto run. So just plugging in a USB, like a proper flash drive, won't be enough. You'll have to get them to click on it. So a lot of times if they have a printer, you say, hey, I've got a document. Can you print that for me? And if the Word doc comes up, oh, just enable content. That will make sure that it has all the content there. The enable content then runs your script in the doc, right? You can also get something like a rubber ducky, which looks like a USB, but it's actually the computer thinks it's a keyboard, and you pre-program in what the keyboard writes out. So even if you have places that don't allow USB flash drives to be plugged in, typically they'll let these rubber duckies be plugged in because the computer thinks it's just a keyboard. And really quickly, you'll basically open up a PowerShell prompt or a command terminal, and you can then run the malicious code there. Either do a download run in memory, or you can type out the malware too. Just depends on how much time you have. But having someone else plug in a rogue device is a wonderful idea. Next question is, what are some of the hardest things you frequently deal with on ops? So I'm full scope. I will do, that means I test security on logical systems, social systems, and physical systems. So I will hack into computers. I'll do network penetration tests, system penetration tests, you know, entire environments, web applications, websites. We'll do phishing, vishing, and so any kind of conning over the phone or audio. Phishing is general, so conning over text, so email, social media, text messages, etc., and then in-person conning. And then I also do, besides social engineering, I'll do physical pen tests where I'm trying to break or bypass devices. We typically use non-destructive means, but lock picking under the door tools, setting off motion sensors. Did a recent gig where I went in through a roof access panel. That was quite interesting. So the hardest things that I frequently deal with on ops, I don't know. So that's kind of a generic question. So let me ask this, Adam, and then I'll kick it back to you to see if it answers your question. A lot of times, like, things that will stop me are folks following the right policy procedures. Not necessarily people detecting me. Not many people detect me, but people will stop me plenty of times. So in social engineering, it's, if I call them, they'll usually refer me to a manager who has a vetting process, right? The people that are used to dealing with salespeople are used to dealing with any kind of con artist. So that will stop us often. If I'm trying to break in through passive social engineering, like tailgating, it's the policy procedure that doesn't let people tailgate in. They're using a good badge system that can't be sniffed rather easily, and they just don't hold the door open. The problem, so I say don't hold the door open. Almost everywhere people hold the door open. So what I found is, I guess, really, to answer your question, it's well-designed places that have security built in by default. So security is ubiquitous. So for instance, I know a place that, there's two types of places. I've been one where they try to train people not to let people tailgate in, and that helps, but usually you can find a person who's either in a rush or just really kind of not thinking. They'll let you in. The places that are really good are the ones that say, let everybody go into the lobby so you can hold the doors open. And then they have like man traps or turnstiles where you can't open the door. The security takes into considerations people's behavior and builds security around that. And that includes even on the network side of things. It's the one where they let the people essentially download a malware, but it stops it, or it stops it from even getting into their inbox to begin with, or things along those lines. In network hacking, typically the thing that stops me are updated and patched systems. And multi-factor authentication, I think is kind of the key. I can crack passwords, I can brute force passwords, I can con people into giving me their passwords, but if you have multi-factors set up everywhere, you limit your attack surface, that gives me a hard time. Does that answer your question, Adam? Adam says yes, thanks. Green Jam says, would you continue a con after, quote, coming clean about being a pen tester, though? So that's kind of meta. So let's think of it this way. If they have not properly authenticated me, if I come up and say, oh, I'm trying to break in and someone stops me, and I go, oh, it's okay, I'm just testing you, I'm just a pen tester, and they believe me, well, then let's see, can you guys hear me okay? I'm sorry, I'm over here using my hands to talk, so okay.
Yes.
I just smacked up my mute button here. If I go up to a person and they stop me and I go, oh, hey, I'm just testing you, I'm just a pen tester, and they let me go without authenticating or validating what I've said, well, anybody can do that. Any robber off the street can say, oh, yeah, I work with security, and a lot of people do, right? That's valid. If, however, they have stopped me legitimately and gone through and validated me, and in a normal situation, I would have been arrested or shot, then there's really no point in continuing that pretext. I might still, if depending on the test and the scope of work, I might still do other work, right? But it won't stem from that attack vector. Maybe I come in at night and try to break in or whatever, through different means. That's okay if you have time. But if someone's actually validated you, then you stop the narrative right there, because in a normal situation, you would have been arrested. Does that answer your question? I think that was Green Jam. Okay. Green Jam says, yes, thanks. That's awesome. Dan says, what's the best resource to learn more about CompSec engineering? So computer security engineering. I'm going to define engineering, and let me know, Dan, if this is in line with your thinking. The engineering is actually building the defenses, and that can be anything from firewalls to kind of limit attack surface, to web application firewalls that prevent specific attacks, to intrusion detection and intrusion prevention systems, or various different types of security proxies. Is that kind of what you mean by security, computer security engineering, Dan? And pen testing tools. Okay. So building out the security engineering, I don't know of any, off the top of my head, I don't know of any really good books, and that's because I'm just not in the building. I'm in the breaking. And breaking by itself doesn't do a whole lot of good unless you're teamed up with builders and fixers. Building and fixing is the hardest job. Breaking is a little bit easier. So I can't really answer that from my point. For the pen testing tools from a computer standpoint, two of the best ones to really get your foot wet, kind of get your toes wet and kind of get ready for it. One is the penetration testing book by Georgia Weidman. Let me pull that up real quick. Y'all gonna hear my beast of a freaking typewriter here. Yeah, it's Georgia Weidman's just penetration testing. Let's see, what's the full name of that? Because this one's really good to kind of get the full scope. Penetration testing, a hands-on introduction to hacking. That one's really, really good for kind of the full security penetration test. It has a lot of really good introductory stuff. They put it out a couple years ago, but the whole framework of how to conduct a test, from reconnaissance to vulnerability analysis, exploitation, et cetera, that's really, really good. It's an awesome resource. So far as individual tools, that's going to be Hacker's Playbook. I think they have edition 3 out, and let me see who wrote that. I used to have his name memorized, and he'll have to forgive me from this. I'm looking it up. Anybody else can find it while I'm looking for it. It's the Hacker Playbook 3rd edition. And I'll get you an author right now. No, is that the same one? I'm using my Google foo. Peter Kim, thank you very much. That was Green Gem. So yeah, Peter Kim did it. I just see that myself as well. So Peter Kim, the Hacker's Playbook 3, that one, it gives a bunch of common and well-known tools to perform different types of attacks. There's very much in the industry and even in hacker culture, the concept of a script kiddie. And a lot of people say, hey, go and learn how the computer fully works before you test it. I found that I disagree with that in much the same way that I disagree with how we teach language typically in America. The way, a lot of times in America, you can take a language course and they'll teach you the grammar, they'll teach you how to conjugate verbs, etc. But you find yourself in a foreign country and you can't even ask where the bathroom is, right? You put the cart before the horse. So the way you learn a language, for communication, you typically learn phrases first. Hello, here am I. Hello, how are you? Where am I? Where is this, etc. And you may not know what each individual word means, but you know the phrase will get you this thing. Once you learn the phrases, you'll get up to the edge of your knowledge, and you'll have to learn more phrases and more individual words. And at that point, that's when you start learning conjugation and grammar, so that you start creating your own phrases, right? And I found that hacking, if you really want to dive into it, learn the scripts, learn the common tools, learn, just follow the examples, go through walkthroughs for Hacker's Playbook or not Hacker's Playbook, but Hack the Box and other CTFs, etc. Go through the walkthroughs, get a feel for it. Download Metasploitable 1, 2, and 3, and do walkthroughs just to get a feel for the tools. It's almost like if you're learning firearms, just get a feel for the firearm and know how to shoot a target. Then worry about how to do group movement with a Marine fire team or something like that, right? what's going to happen, and really the difference between a script kiddie and a hacker is that curiosity. A script kiddie might stop and they'll try everything. If it doesn't work, well, they move on, or they stop it. They go find an easier target or whatever. You're going to find that once you learn these tools, you're going to get to a point where it doesn't work. It very rarely works ever. And you're going to have to figure out why it doesn't work. Or you're going to go underneath, what is this really doing at the packet level? Why does this work? And that's where you really start building up that cohesive knowledge base that breaks you out of that initial script kiddie and then really into that hacker mentality. But start with just knowing what's out there first. Then move on to why does that work, and then move on to how are things kind of built up, and then move on into creating your own attacks. Does that help? I'm hoping it helps, Dan. I'm about to move on. All right, cheers. Dan says thank you. Okay. Let's see. We're about half past the hour. We got about roughly another 30 minutes. Let's see. Mitchell asks, speaking of USBs, in your experience, does just dead dropping USBs actually work? He goes on to opine, I can't imagine that even the most non-security focused user would just randomly plug in something they found on the floor in the lobby. USBs being like, USB devices, and dead dropping is the act of either literally dropping it on the floor or setting it up. I have never had that work for me, not anymore. Regardless of what you see on Mr. Robot or what have you. The big reason is, even if they just plug it in, you have to have them engage in it. So if you want to do it, typically what works is if you load malware on the USB, you give it to somebody, you build that rapport individually, and you con them into clicking on a report. It's a typical, hey, I need this printed. Can you print it for me? Right? There's nothing wrong with that. People don't think, and so they open up the document and do that. Adam says, make a doc file and call it private. There's a fun thing that we've worked out. We've never tried though. Is essentially, if you go in, you get one of those really fun looking USBs, like, that have like, either minions on or what have you, that they look like something fun, and put a bunch of images on there, right? And do .jpeg.exe or something like that. Hide the extension afterwards, and, put it into a little note card that says, hey, for your eyes only, can't wait until you're back, hope this tides you, or something like that. Put a nice lipstick on it, spritz it with some perfume, and leave that in, a men's locker room or a men's restroom for someone to find, thinking that maybe they'll pick it up, plug it in, and try to click on the tools or try to click on the pictures or whatever. The big thing is, if you do a dead drop, you want to entice them to where they on their own will continue to click, continue to run everything, and you got to kind of plan that out. Realistically, nowadays, ever since auto run was turned off, you can do a dead drop with a USB rubber ducky, but that can, a built one is $50. You can build your own, but even that takes a lot of work. If you want to do it, fine. But I found that there's a lot more easier ways of doing that than do it. An interesting thing though is, if you're close enough to do a dead drop, you can do what's called a mouse jack. And this is a vulnerability in a lot of wireless keyboard and wireless mice, that you can basically use a device to impersonate those wireless keyboards and inject your own keystrokes, and then basically do what amounts to as that rubber ducky attack. But you can do that remotely from like the parking lot, 100 yards away or so. But yeah, to answer your question, no, USB dead drops, just dropping it, typically don't work. I wouldn't waste the time or money myself. Does that answer your question? Okay, cheers. Let's see what the next one be. Andrew asks, what would you consider critical bit of training and or knowledge you use daily, not in traditional courses, and why? Oh, that's a good one. When you get started, you kind of go in with what you learned on your own and find that none of it works the first time. And so you get into an actual environment and you're quickly learning, and then you learn one trick, and that got you into that environment. And then the next environment that you're trying to break into or hack into, you immediately try that trick and it doesn't work. So you have to go then find a new one. And after, you know, I don't know, 10, 20 of these kind of things, you have a good kind of toolbox of things that you know works. And at that point, typically you can kind of use one of those to at least get a foothold somewhere, right? And at that point now you're branching out. I joke that I know about 5 different tricks that give me into all corporations. And if I can hit them real quickly, have a little bit extra time, then I go and learn and teach stuff. But really the biggest thing is, and this is going to sound kind of corny, but I don't see a lot of people that train this, right? Is the ability to, it's 2 parts. One is to be resourceful. So you're Google Foo, you're using DuckDuckGo to be able to know what to look for. Most of the time when I go in there and I do a scan, I have no idea what that software is. I've never seen it in my life. And so I've got to look it up. I've got to download a manual. I've got to learn how it works. You know, is there any way can it run, you know, executable or something like that? I need to be able to research well targeted and on the fly. And a lot of courses don't teach that research thing. You know, some of them like OSCP will say, hey, you know, try harder. And that kind of builds in its own research. You kind of learn how to learn on your own. It kind of facilitates or forces that. But a lot of places don't really teach you how and where to research. So, you know, Stack Exchange is really good stuff. Ubuntu is really good stuff. Really the big thing for me is I call a lot of friends and say, hey, have you encountered that? They call me. You know, I know that if I need to get into one thing, this guy's a guru, so he might be able to walk me through, and he knows if he needs to get into something, I might be able to help him out. And you kind of build up a knowledge base. You can't really give secrets of the place you're hitting because of NDAs, but you can talk high level. So the big thing though is research, that resourcefulness. The second thing is a mindset, is you have to be very comfortable with being ignorant, with not knowing what to do, and at failing all the time. And I don't even mean like the failing, and it taught me something. I mean, like you're going to go down rabbit holes and it's just not going to work. You know, I'll sit there and I'll try to hack into something for 3 or 4 days and nothing works. All my old tricks, none of it works. Everything I'm trying, none of it works. And you just got to get used to saying, okay, that didn't work, and then move on. If you're like a systems administrator, or you're an engineer or something, you can get a body of knowledge down to where you can consider yourself an expert. I found that in hacking, you're never the expert. You'll never, the amount of information, the amount of new things that are out there is expanding faster than you'll ever be able to learn. So even if you do nothing but study and practice every single day, you're losing knowledge so far as the percentage of knowledge that's out there. And so being able to be very comfortable being the jack of all trades, of not being the expert, of always being ignorant and never knowing what to do. You know, you have your methodology, you have your, here's how I will find out what to do. But in any given situation, I'm plopped down and I never know what I'm going to do, like as an actual tangible thing. So being comfortable being ignorant, being comfortable failing, I think is something that's not taught. And that's a mindset that you have to have. Does that help you? Cheers. He said, yes, awesome answer. And I'm not making fun of you. I don't know what you sound like, Andrew. So I'm assuming that you sound dynamic because you put an exclamation mark there. All right, let's see. Ray asks, do you have any good stories where the whole thing just fell apart during the op? Fell apart's an interesting question. A few things fall apart. So a lot of places will stop me, but they don't capture me, so I can come and try again, right? Some places stop me and there's just no more time left, right? But they don't necessarily catch me. It's more that they prevented my attacks. I did have one where I started off on the inside. They brought me in as an insider threat. So usually breaching the perimeter is the tough part, but they started me inside with the idea they assumed the perimeter was breached either through, you know, an external thing being hacked or a phishing attack or someone broke in or an insider threat, right? Adam says, oh, I heard this episode on Darknet Diaries. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I started off there and I did some good hacks, right? You know, I was able to con some folks. I was able to bypass multi-factor authentication. I conned somebody out of their token. That was awesome. I managed to find, you know, with some guidance from a colleague of mine, a privilege escalation that I could get access to something and then escalate up to system, to admin, to administrator rather. And, you know, I broke into their IT shack. I stole a bunch of computers. I managed to pull hashes off of those and crack those hashes, you know. And I did a lot of good, but in the end, I actually got full-blown caught. I popped a shell on a lady in finance's computer and was able to do what I could do for about, you know, a good handful of minutes, probably about 30 minutes or so. And then my shell died, and I ended up going looking. Yeah, I walked around. I was tired. I walked around the corner, and she pointed me out. She's like, "There, that's the jerk." She didn't say that. She was like, "There, that's the one. He's the one who touched my computer." And the very brawny dude, actually, there's a couple of them, but the very brawny dude talking to her was in blue team. He was intrusion detection. He looked right at me, and boy, I that stopped pretty quickly. But I had been going for about a week. And I did everything I could. And at that point, honestly, they were ready for a full red team where we had a team of folks and probably about a month's worth of work to be able to prepare. But for that pen test, it was that's the one that really stopped me. Boy, I tell you, they did a lot of things right. They had some things that they needed to improve, and I was able to give them a full report, and they were able to use that. But boy, they were on the spot. But yeah, as Adam mentioned, that I did that story. I did a Twitter thread on that initially, and the Twitter thread went viral. And it's called "Singing the Blues" when blue team kicks the red team's ass, or just "Singing the Blues" on there. And you can probably find that on Twitter. And that got on Hacker News for a little bit. And then Jack Resider reached out to me from Darknet Diaries and asked that I do that for him as well. But yeah, that's kind of the pride and joy of when I got my ass handed to me. Does that answer your question, Ray?
Yes, thank you.
Cheers. You said you loved the Layer 8 story as well. Yeah, thank you for that. I've got, I can't tell all of my stories. I've got, you know, a good handful that I can kind of repeat, and that's because most of the time I'm bound by non-disclosure agreements. And so I get a couple places like, hey, we don't mind you if you use this as an example, so long as you kind of change our name and, you know, change some details that are not important to the story but are important to us maintaining operational security. They don't mind me saying that. And so I've got a couple of those good stories that I put out there. Let's see. Okay. Anthony follows up on Adam Francis' question, says, if you did do self-training, what kind of resources have you used? So self-training is constant. If I have like a week to do a pen test, you know, a couple, like a huge chunk of that's going to be reconnaissance, and then a huge chunk is training. I'm now in a new environment, and I need to train on how to do it. Again, you know, you can rely on what you've learned through all these other resources, but you know, when you're in those environments, those resources give you sample attacks. They give you kind of a methodology to follow, but they can't tell you how to hack everything, even for the simple fact that these folks might be using a new software that or solution that came out the next day. So you constantly self-train, you constantly research. And so Twitter is generally, or has been, a good means for that. A lot of times new 0 days, new methods of attack go out there. A lot of people will put out a lot of free training. You know, Mubix does a Metasploit Minute that he put out a while back, and he puts out a lot of, if you go just read Mubix's blog, he's a really great resource. All of these books that you can get a hand. No Starch Press puts out so many books, you know, lean on them for that. There's a lot of free stuff out there for hacking. And there's some MOOCs out there as well. If you can get access like Udacity or Coursera, some of those will put out some too. Oh, what is that MOOC that I can't remember what it's called. It's a security specific one. I'm going to research it right now. Study for free. I don't know. I'll have to look it up. edX is a good one too. So there are a lot of good stuff out there. So far as learning like the basics of computer science, and when you start learning, you know, teach yourself the grammar, you know, do learn, you know, like Coursera and edX have a lot of really good stuff. edX has CS50, which is Harvard's Comp Sci 101, teaches you C. You guys are already learning a lot being at your college. And so all those kind of core stuff. There's a lot of, learn Linux, things like that. So you learn the basics of, Adam mentions Linda. Yeah, if it's on there, absolutely use that resource. Portswigger Academy is another one that's typically with web application. Thank you, Andrew, for that. There's just so many resources out there. Your local library will push a lot of them out there too. And those are learning the basics, the learning of how does this work, and therefore you can learn kind of attacks on. Some are attack specific as well. You start getting into kind of like how to learn, training so far as self-taught training on, say, like social engineering and stuff. There are some social engineering in the modern age books out there that are good. There's some specific training. Those are all fine. But if you guys really want to get good at social engineering, go over to your communications department and audit some comms courses. If you want to learn how to phish somebody, go into email marketing. They're doing the same thing. They're building rapport. They're getting you to click on a link. They're getting you to do an action, and they track clicks and downloads and all that kind of stuff. If you want to learn how to con somebody to your face, that's all sales. So really, sales and marketing are kind of the biggest thing. Information security is older than computers. One of the biggest breaches of the 20th century was a citizens brigade breaking into the FBI offices and exposing COINTELPRO, which was a lot of the FBI's operations against civil rights movements. They broke into the building, and they did a data breach by stealing a bunch of files out of the paper files out of file cabinets. That's information security, and that's before the computers. So there's a lot of stuff out there. A lot of the old cons, the classic cons, still work to this day. They're just tweaked a little bit for computers. So really, the biggest thing is if I don't know something, I start off just like anything. I'll either, if I know somebody knows the answer on my team, I might call them up if they're not busy, just to kind of get a lazy web kind of thing. And a lot of time, my colleagues don't mind answering my questions, just like I don't mind answering their question. You get a good crew of a diverse skill set and background, that's worth the weight in gold. You'll help each other out. Can't do that, then you use DuckDuckGo or Google. I prefer DuckDuckGo. Obviously, it has its privacy aspects, but Google will create a filter bubble around you, and whereas DuckDuckGo won't, and so you have much greater access to that. And then you start looking up books, and then you start doing your searches. But that's kind of thing. It's just constant. Obviously, everything, a lot of manuals. So like if I'm hacking into a printer, I'm going to download the printer manual and kind of do that. Does that answer your question? Cheers. Says yes, thanks. All right. I've got time for a couple more questions. Let's see, some folks they're interacting with each other and giving each other ideas already. Yeah, if you guys are in this group, when you guys get out of college and you get into various different levels, I'll give you an idea. I tend to hack into places, but if I need to bypass intrusion detection, I have a lot of friends that are working on the blue team, and I'll say, hey, I know you use this tool. What's a good way, what's something that would make it to where you couldn't see an attack? And they hate telling me, but they will because they're my friend. Whereas if they're trying to build up their detection, they might have me attack them and let them know how I did it so they can build up detection. So make friends. Red team and pen testing only exist to support security engineering and the blue team on detection and prevention. So utilize them as well, just like you guys are utilizing each other here. Let's see. Mitchell asks, one odd question. I thought about something before. Have you ever considered or been asked to, I guess the best description would be to dox test somebody, i.e. a high profile phish target would task a pen tester to see how well an attacker could identify the target from a given anonymous username belonging to the user. Yeah, we get this all the time, especially for high value targets. So C-level, these are basically anti-fraud tests. And so a lot of C-level will say, hey, can you give us entire dossiers of all of these different people based off of what you can find on the internet? And that's basically with the idea of seeing what's exposed, cleaning that up, et cetera. So Yeah, we do that all the time. The only time that I'm comfortable with doing that is, if that person themselves or someone that is speaking on their behalf authorizes me to dox them. The other thing is if we are doing spear phishing, so we're trying to send a phishing email spear phishing, and I find a person, I will do as much. I will essentially dox them. I build up a dossier of who they are in order to better con them, but I don't necessarily turn over the docs in the report. I keep a lot of that private, but I say that I did research on them, and then I tell them what kind of what I used, if you will, if that helps. Does that answer your question, Mitchell? Cheers. Let's see. Andrew asks, do I ever work on bug bounties? Not typically. Bug bounties are basically a lot of places out there, often web applications, but now, especially with Internet of Things and industrial control systems, even in cars, et cetera, different companies will put out a bug bounty. And the idea is to crowdsource security quality assurance. And if you find something that no one else has found, they might pay money, or they might give some swag or something like that, or exposure. I don't typically do bug bounties now, just because I don't typically have enough time. That's what it amounts to. I'm busy running pen tests. So in security quality assurance, you have pen tests, you have red teams, full like adversarial emulation red teams. You have a vulnerability analysis, so your scanners, your enumeration, validation, and you have bug bounties. Bug bounties are really good for a company because it's a very wide surface and typically pretty shallow. You're not allowed to act on the bug once you've validated it, whereas pen tests tend to be kind of narrow and deep. Also, with bug bounties, unless the bounty is high, people might not even give a lot of looking at it. And so you might get a lot of easy things found, but not any deep things. Whereas if you pay a pen tester, they're going to look at it regardless of whether they find anything or not. They're going to give full due diligence on it. So I don't typically work on bug bounties now. Every once in a while, an interesting one will pop up from like a company I've been interested in, and I'll tool around and play with it because that gives you legal legal permission to do that as long as you're working within their scope. So it can be fun every once in a while, but I don't typically do that. That being said, if you want to get into web application security or security quality assurance or even pen testing, if you practice on bug bounties and you found many bugs, that's wonderful on a resume for getting another job based off of that. It's good experience as well. So a lot of people make that their entire career. They stick with bug bounties throughout, and they're able to make it work. But hopefully that answers your question. All right, I'm going to answer one other question. See if I can find one here. Well, maybe two. Adam France asks, do people still brute force, or is that purely something relegated to simple batch work like testing tons of email accounts? I use brute forcing all the time. A lot of times if I need to get in from the outside, and you have like, a VPN, or you have a Citrix web app, or RDP or something like that, or even just email, everybody, if you have if your corporate email, or if your corporate password requires you to have minimum 8 characters, mixture of 3 out of 4 of upper, lower, number, and symbol, and you have to change it every 90 days, the current season and the year always works. You'll find 2 or 3 people that have that. If I need just a single foothold, brute forcing is absolutely going to work. And I love pen testing because a lot of times you find the lowest hanging fruit first, because even the most advanced APT, the NSA, China, Russia, what have you, they're not going to burn a 0-day on you if you're using common passwords that they can brute force. So I try to, whenever I find things, if I find the easy things first and they fix that, I do 2 things. I remove entire classes of threat actors. So I remove the script kiddies, I remove the automated botnets, et cetera. But I also take a simple tool out of an advanced actors tool set. So yeah, that works all the time. If I can get into your massive corporation by brute forcing, then yes, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to highlight why it's a big deal so that they fix it. And hopefully they fix it the next time I go around. I can't do it, and then I have to move on to something a little bit more difficult. Let's see. I'll do one more. I think that's about it. Okay, I've got two more questions been asked, and I'll answer those two more questions. So, Andrew asks, are most of your pen tests black, gray, or crystal box? Black box, for those of you who aren't aware, I have no knowledge of the system beforehand, except for maybe something like, maybe like client name, what have you. Gray box is maybe they provide me with some targets that are already valid that I know of, but they don't provide me very much information. They might give me some guidance, but they really want to know what I can find on my own. And crystal box or white box is where it's basically a top down. I can see everything, and it's basically a security audit. So most of my pen tests are black box, dark gray. So a lot of my pen tests will say, hey, this is our range, right, from the outside, or this is our email domain, etc. But it's up for me to really find new targets. And what I do is I'll enumerate targets, and then I'll kick it back to them and say, hey, are these actually you? They might have one that it's under their domain, but a third party uses it, and they don't have legal authorization to let me break into their neighbor's house. So I validate that. So I'd say validated black box is the typical one. If there is any gray, it's, they might give me like a scope range. Crystal boxes or white box, like security audits, I'll do a little bit. I'll do a couple of those a year. Those are really, where, especially if they don't have a lot of time, like black box pen tests are really good in that it's what is actually out there for an attacker and what can you do in a given amount of time, right? But if someone can't afford that, maybe they only have one day, and that one day I basically finish reconnaissance and some initial vuln scanning or what have you, or vuln enumeration or what have you. It's not enough time. Actual attackers, they don't have an infinite amount of time, but they've got at least several weeks. And so if they don't have a lot of time or don't have a lot of money, I can go in and they go, here's everything. Don't try to evade detection. We'll know where you're at. Just tell us what you can see. And I can immediately say, hey, all this over here, I could be able to do that. I could do this over here. I could do this over here, et cetera. I might do like security walkthroughs. The other flip side is if it's a place that it's too dangerous for me to pen test them. So that's either a lot of operational technology, industrial control centers. If I do the wrong thing, someone dies. I might not want to pen test an active 911 network. If I knock over a computer accidentally, that could cost lives. Or they use such highly trained armed guards that I might get shot. Now, I have pen tested, even physical pen tested places that use armed guards. I don't mind doing that, but you got to be really careful. But if it's the one where there's a high likelihood of me getting injured, we'll typically move to a crystal box. And I go, okay, hey, everybody knows I'm here, and I'll walk through with my point of contact and point out things, or I'll do a report on my own after pulling information from the network. But most of the time, my pen tests are black box. Anthony Q says, is DHA going to start back up come May? DHA is Dallas Hackers Association. It's a den of thieves and grifters, con artists, and burglars and hackers. We have closed down because of the coronavirus. The short answer is we have no idea. We will open it back up as soon as it's safe. And we'll determine whether it's safe, typically either by official announcements or our own investigations. We closed down even before the shelter-in-place stuff went through with Dallas County. So as soon as we know that the virus is behind us, we'll open back up. Honestly, that may be in a year and a half when we have the vaccine. In the meantime, we're not doing anything virtual, but some of our sister groups like Fire Talks Online is doing virtual. So Fire Talks Online is going to start meeting the first Wednesday of every month, and everybody worldwide is welcome to that. And that's basically the group that goes to DHA will probably be attending that. So it's basically going to be the virtual DHA, but no, we won't come back up until it's safe to do so. And I think that's it. Yeah. Cheers all. I appreciate you guys having me.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for coming. And if you didn't see, Tinker's Twitter is at Tinker Sec, right?
That is correct.
You can follow him on there. Thank you for talking with us. This was great. And have a good night, everybody.
Cheers all. Y'all have a good night. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.